Have you ever thought about selling your knowledge or some unique information and expertise that you have as a business? Well, if you're like many entrepreneurs, you've probably considered it at one point or another. In this video, I'm going to be walking you through exactly how I became a 7-figure information business owner and how you can do the same. Most of you know me as Allie Bloyd, the agency owner and coach for local businesses and agencies and marketers who serve local businesses. But my journey as an entrepreneur has really been pretty vast over the last couple of years. What I do today is so significantly different in terms of the structure than what I did when I started my business 4.5 years ago. And even before that, I was already learning and gaining the skills that I would need to do exactly what I'm doing today. So I want to walk you through all of the steps that I took to get to the point in which I was a full-time information business. And this is something that a lot of people see as a pipe dream and something that once I did not see as viable, at least in the way that it could be my entire business model. And I was wrong. And I think that ultimately you're going to find this to be very inspirational, hopefully very helpful, and that it will give you some clear-cut next steps if you are looking to become an information business owner as well. A lot of people know that my first experience in business was actually working for my parents' rental home company. I would help them fix up these properties and turn them into rentals. And so I was doing a lot of grunt work, but I really got my first taste of business at that point. And I thought it was amazing what they were able to do. And I was just always an extremely hard worker. So I was able to get into it. I loved making money. And so that was an easy way for me to make money. And the knowledge of real estate and things related to home services definitely served me to this day. I work with a lot of home service businesses. I had planned on being in the medical space and then ultimately had an experience where I spent some time in the hospital visiting somebody close to me, and I just realized this is not for you. It would have just ripped out my soul. Ultimately, I need creativity. I need to be able to come up with new ideas. So I am very glad that I came to that realization when I did. But through that time, I came up with an idea for a dog clothing company. And I had taken a semester off college to really figure out, okay, if you're not going to do what you've thought you would do your whole life, what do you do? And so I had some time to kind of play around with things and figure out what I wanted. I realized pretty quickly that graphic design was going to be something pretty necessary for almost everything that I needed to do. I had bought a program to try and teach myself graphic design. I realized that I loved it, and I thought that I wanted to finish my degree in graphic design and marketing. So that's exactly what I did. Those skills are skills that I use to this day. After that, I was working for a publishing company, and this publishing company focused on trade magazines for local businesses. So they had a few different trade magazines in different industries. I realized how what they were doing was really an information and marketing business. And I actually helped them launch a brand new magazine into a brand new industry. I was doing all the design for the magazine, all the writing, all the interviews, selling the advertising, like literally everything. And I wasn't being paid for it. So that obviously caused some problems, but truthfully, I still cannot be anything but thankful for that experience because I learned so much about the information business at a time when I didn't even technically know what the information business was. So I knew I wanted to be in marketing. I have always been a writer. I've been writing since I was about 5 years old, songs and stories and making up commercial jingles when I'm like 6 or 7 years old. That should have been a tip off that I should have been in the marketing space. But I just saw it as kind of a stepping stone job. And ultimately I took on a very entrepreneurial role in that company when I launched the new magazine. So that was also great experience, but they were ultimately taking information and formatting it into articles. And this was a free publication that they would then buy a mailing list of all these different businesses across the US and Canada, and they would send out this information for free. And how they made money was they sold the advertising in the magazine. And it was a pretty simple and straightforward business model, and definitely taught me so very much that I still use to this day. But looking back, it was all focused around that information. Without that information in the magazine, there would have been nothing to sell. There would have been no business. So that really became kind of this very first info product that I was involved in. So I was there for quite a while, learned a lot, definitely needed to be paid for what I was doing, had to survive. So I ended up leaving and I went back to being a server. I had been serving in restaurants and bartending for a couple of years. I started when I was 18. So that was what I did full time for a little bit. And then I was able to get a position as a marketing director for a roofing and restoration company. That was also some great experience, definitely kind of a sketchy company. So I ended up leaving that company when some weird stuff started to take place. And then ultimately, I got my next position as a marketing director for a large home renovation and design company. And I was there for almost 5 years. But in my role as a marketing director, that knowledge that I attained through that period became the foundation of my career, because I had a unique opportunity to be behind the scenes of every aspect of that business. The owner of that business really took me under his wing and mentored me. He was a very successful businessman, and I am so grateful for him taking the time to really nurture my entrepreneurial tendencies. He knew I had wanted to start a business at some point. I told him that very, very early on when I started working there. And then obviously, eventually I did. But I was able to do a lot more than just handle all the marketing. It was my first experience in paid advertising on a large scale. So I had done some with the previous roofing and restoration company that I was with. And obviously, paid advertising was a huge focus for the magazine. But in terms of digital, Facebook and Instagram ads, like really being a core component of what I was doing, it was there that I studied, I learned, I tested some more, and I was able to create a lot of the strategies that I still use to this day and that I teach to local business owners all over the world. So that was just amazing on the advertising side. But I think probably one thing that has always set me apart as a marketer is my deep understanding of the sales process, of sales itself, and also of the back end side of the business, the operations side. And so I was able to learn a lot about that through the magazine, as well as in my role as the marketing director. I really saw how all the pieces tied together, and I saw the problems, I saw the hiccups and the issues that came with disconnected departments, primarily the marketing department and the sales department, but also the marketing and sales and customer service, marketing, sales, customer service, and fulfillment. All of these different aspects, there were some serious issues, not just from a trackability standpoint, but from a communication standpoint, and things that I saw very clearly were impacting the ability to scale as quickly as we had wanted to. And so my goal was to try and solve those problems, because as the marketing director, I wanted to know that what I was doing was making a big impact. I wanted to be able to track this and say, hey, look how much revenue I produced directly from my campaigns for this company. I knew that that was my way to get raises in the future, to prove my worth, essentially. And so I went above and beyond the marketing department, and I really focused on trying to tie all of those pieces together so that I could improve things. And again, that information is something that I still use to this very day. I also got to train my own support staff. I got to deal with every aspect of marketing and sales from A to Z. And I loved it, but I got to a point where I knew I was going to be very unhappy if I did not start my own business. I actually remember just laying on the couch with my husband one night, just kind of crying silently. And he's like, what's wrong? And I said, I don't own a business yet. And that's how I felt. The fact that I was not living in alignment with what I knew to be my calling, so to speak, it was definitely making me not feel great emotionally. And so I knew that I had to do something. I actually started my company while I was still employed full time. I had a family, I had a house, I had a child. I wanted to make sure that I did this the right way and I didn't put any unnecessary burden on my household. I started that business while I still had an income. I worked really hard initially to build a warm audience online, even before I was full-time in my own business. And the foundation that I laid there was ultimately the key to my growth moving forward in a lot of ways. So I really had a focus on education-based marketing from day one because that's what I had done at the remodeling and home improvement business. I had made education a core focus of our marketing strategies, of really building this education-based content plan and executing it. That included doing educational seminars and live events as a big part of our marketing as well, which worked very, very well. And so I started doing live videos, webinars, and free trainings. I started a Facebook group that just, grew kind of slowly early on. And no matter what I was doing, I was still acting as though I had a large audience. I was putting out content and information on local business marketing because I knew I wanted to brand myself in that way. I had a very heavy focus on home improvement and real estate early on. I had already actually created a course. Ironically, that was the very first thing that I did in my business. It took 3 months and I did a very in-depth comprehensive course. It's a course I still sell today. It's had, a lot of updates made to it since then, but it is still a very, very relevant course. It's called Remodel Your Marketing, and it's an A to Z type of program. And as soon as I completed that, I started really marketing myself a little bit more. It was less just value-based content, and I started trying to really talk about my services. I started to post a lot more in Facebook groups, or really just respond to other people's posts. It was still mainly an educational value-based angle, but I was at least trying to drive them to webinars and trainings and things like that. So that's how I built my earliest audience, and my earliest email list was organic content only. I was not running paid ads for myself yet, and sending them to typically webinars, teaching them how to do what I had been doing. It was really through a lot of the organic content, though, just the posts that I was making on my personal profile. I had made a lot of friend requests and connections with other home service business owners. I was able to get my first couple of clients for the agency. Things were going along pretty well. I realized very quickly that the agency business is challenging in terms of the fulfillment side, and I got to work very quickly on creating systems and processes and checklists to be able to try and systemize the fulfillment of multiple clients in the same way that I had tried to systemize the marketing and sales process to begin with. So I started hiring a VA. I actually hired my mom. My mom still works with me to this day, and she was helping with really whatever I needed. The VA was helping a lot with doing the client setup and ad setup based on the SOPs that I had created for that. And business was going pretty well. I decided to hire my first coach only a couple of months after going full-time into my business. And that experience was great. If nothing more, I think such a big lesson there for me was just the matter of releasing my money and investing into my business, because I'd always been a very frugal person just in my personal finances, and I needed to get used to investing heavily in my business. And that was my first big business investment. So it felt really good. I learned a lot. Over the next 6 months or so, I ended up hiring a second coach. And this was really more specific to the agency business, and not just business in general, as the other program was a little bit more geared towards that. So this program gave me a lot of great things, but I think probably the biggest was the coach encouraging me to start my own group program. So at that time, even though I had not been full-time in my business for that long, I had really been able to build a nice audience of people who were starting to recognize me, who knew who I was. And I had worked very hard to network and get on podcasts and things like that, highlighting these systems and processes that I had created for local businesses. So one of the first podcasts that I got on that really had a very major impact in my business was Perpetual Traffic. So this was Molly Pittman and Ralph Burns, and ultimately, Molly became a good friend. And so this podcast really got my name out there in a big way. It didn't really take much to be able to get on some of these podcasts that I was getting on. It took initiative and having unique information to share that I could share very clearly and concisely. So from that opportunity, I then was invited to speak at Digital Marketer, which was something else that really gave me a lot of credibility. I also won a ClickFunnels 2 Comma Club award, which was another great piece for my business. And then at that time, my coach was seeing all of this PR, publicity, credibility type of engagement that was happening. And he knew that I had a pretty good size audience of other marketers asking me to help them, or just other local business owners who needed help, but they did not necessarily have the money or maybe the desire to utilize agency services. And also, as someone who was still growing their business, I couldn't take on this massive influx of clients at one time. I kind of had a slow and steady mentality because I wanted to make sure that I didn't completely fail on the fulfillment side. And so there was only so many people that I could help at one time, but he knew I had a lot of people reaching out to me. So he said, hey, why don't you start a group program where you teach people how to do this as opposed to you doing it for them? So I was a little nervous, but I took his advice and I continued to try and get some different podcast interviews and things that would help get my name out there even more so that I could promote it. And I also decided that I was going to do a 5-day challenge launch strategy. So the 5-day challenge is something that I still do to this day, and it is awesome. It works really well. I had done them previous to this. I'd done a couple of them. They were mainly organic though, to where I wasn't spending a lot of money on paid ads. But for this one, I knew I wanted to go a lot bigger because this was a group program launch and I wanted to fill as many spots as I could in a certain period of time because this was going to be a 3-month program. And I charged $5,000 for that first program, but I was still a little bit nervous to invest a couple $1,000s into ads for this. My coach encouraged me and I listened. Obviously, I was comfortable running ads. It was more about, okay, what happens after? Am I really going to be able to sell this program? And I was still skeptical that people would pay that much to learn from me for a couple of months, even though I knew that what I was providing was extremely valuable. It was just different than the done-for-you services I had been used to. So I went ahead and dove headfirst into it. I had this organic strategy behind it. I had $2,000 in paid ads. I launched those ads. My ads were getting a good number of registrations. I was really happy with how they were performing. Then did the challenge. The challenge went really, really well. I had some podcast episodes that had come out, leading up to that challenge that also drove additional registrations, which was great. And then I was able to book sales calls from the people who were in the challenge. And I was able to sell about $60,000 in that first group program launch, which was absolutely life-changing at that time. I thought that it was the coolest thing ever. And I was so just blown away that I was able to make that amount in a very limited time frame. But I absolutely fell in love with it. I loved doing that program. And so this became something that I decided to do after that. I was still doing the agency, and I took a couple of months in between. I tried to focus on improving the content, improving the format. Through the course of that process, my time with my agency coach had ended. And after going through that, I really saw, well, I actually want to lean a lot more into this coaching program than I do in the agency side. I'd done it a couple of times at that point. I really, really loved it. But it was something that I was still doing live launches. It was short term. I just didn't feel like I could build my whole business around this. And so I ended up doing a podcast interview with somebody I'd heard on the Perpetual Traffic podcast a while ago. I thought he was super brilliant when I interviewed him. I loved my conversation with him, and I really just said, okay, how can I hire you to help me do exactly what you've done, because you are awesome. He also had a very minimalist mentality that I liked a lot. He didn't post organically on social media. He didn't have a blog. He didn't have a podcast. He didn't do YouTube videos. It was almost hysterical to me that someone could build this amazing information business and they didn't do any of those things. And here I was kind of trying to do everything, like so many people out there, especially where content's concerned. You feel like you've got to be everywhere. So I loved that he was kind of the balance to my natural tendency to do a lot when it came to the organic content, knowing that not everything was actually producing revenue for my business. Some of it was for sure, but not everything. I was just doing some of it because I felt like I had to. And he is still my coach to this day. I joined his mastermind, finally transitioned away from the agency in those early months. That was one of his first priorities for me, was you've got to fire your agency clients. And I was like, what? You want me to do what? I can't do this. That's too scary. He said, you already know that this is not the direction that you want to go in anymore. You really want to focus on your program. You can make this a huge piece of your business, and you can make your whole business an information business, but you have to trust me. And so I trusted him. So it was not as big of a deal as I thought it was going to be. It actually did not add any major disruptions into my life or business, but it was that fear for sure of, this has been my primary source of income and revenue for my business for the last couple of years. I don't know if I can take that step and make that switch, but I did. And I'm so thankful that I did, because it allowed me to focus where my heart really was. And so I continued to do the group program, but I knew very quickly you have to have an evergreen sales system and marketing system for this, because at that time I had a start and stop model of my program. So it was that 3-month program, and it was live every single time. You couldn't just join whenever you wanted to. Because of that, I knew that was going to make it very hard for a salesperson to want to work with me, because they would not have the consistency of the commission that they wanted. I had already hired a salesperson at that point. I hired it through a sales recruiting company. I actually had a horrible experience. It was a nightmare. Did not end up at the end of the day with a salesperson. And so I had started that process, but I knew I needed somebody else. I could not keep doing sales. I was getting too busy, but I knew that I had to have an evergreen way of doing business. And I had since brought on a salesperson, and I couldn't tell them, hey, don't sell this anymore, until I had an alternative. And my alternative was based on Ollie's advice. He said, just make it a 1-year program. He said, it's going to be better for the people in the program anyway, because I'm sure you know there's a lot more that you have to offer them than just those 12 weeks. And that after the 12 weeks ends, the questions don't end, and the help and the need for support doesn't end. And he was absolutely right. So I did exactly what he said. I extended it to a 1-year program. I made it evergreen. I really focused on improving the program content, restructuring it, did a lot on the back end of the program itself. And then I launched my first evergreen ad strategy for that program. And it was an on-demand VSL, or video sales letter, but that converted very, very well. And it was enrolling people into the program. I would still do 5-day challenges when I wanted to, because I still enjoyed them and they still converted very well. But I just knew I could not rely on them to be the only way I was selling that program. So I finally had that evergreen sales system. And then I kind of got into the pickle of just having trouble with sales, not leads, but my salesperson at the time was just very inconsistent. So it was this up and down cycle of having months that I wouldn't call great in terms of close rate. They were good. They were definitely acceptable. But then the next month would be less than half. And then we'd have an average or good month. And then we'd have a horrible month. And it became just way too much. I realized after trying to work with her a lot to help her improve that she didn't really want to learn. She wasn't doing the things that she needed to do. She wasn't even following the script. And I assumed that somebody who wanted to make more money would be gung-ho about trying to improve their performance. But ultimately, I could just see that it just wasn't going to happen. I probably should have addressed it a lot sooner, but it was a lot of stress just thinking about having to get back on sales calls myself because I was very busy. And so I finally did it. At some point I had to cut my losses because she had had a really bad month the month before and I was still spending good money on ads. I turned off my ads for a month and I focused entirely on email marketing for 1 month to drive bookings and sales. And ironically, I had one of my best sales months ever. So I had met this girl in mastermind who knew I was kind of in this little weird pickle with my salesperson, and she offered to step in and help. She was actually a marketing director for a company that was in the mastermind. She said, "Hey, I'd like to try doing some sales calls for you." So she was able to really just work my existing database. I wasn't spending money on ads because I didn't even know how she was going to do. And so I didn't want to waste that money potentially. I had so many hot leads that hadn't been closed, and she had listened to all our call recordings. She had looked at, my call frameworks and everything. And she said, "Oh, I can definitely do a much better job." So she was able to get in there and really help enroll a lot of people that the previous person had just failed to serve, in my opinion, in the best possible way. And I had some amazing months with a very limited sales calendar availability. And so I knew, okay, I've got to find somebody that can be full-time. I didn't actually know if she'd ever have the ability to be full-time because she had a 9-to-5, and ultimately that wasn't possible in the end. And so I really tried to figure out what needed to be done. And I was so ready to just pull the trigger and hire somebody new. And Ollie told me again, he said, "Listen, I know you don't want to get back on sales calls, but you have got to lean into the process and you have to figure out any kinks in the system that you've got right now. You also need to get some amazing call recordings where things are done the way that you want them done for the next person you bring in. So when you bring that person in, they've got everything they need to really thrive, that you've got what they need to be able to see how this should look." And so that's what I did. And I did it for about 3 months. It was a lot in terms of my time, but it was incredibly valuable at the end of the day. I was finally able to hire somebody to work with me in sales, somebody I've known for years who is actually not in sales at all. Thought they never wanted to be, finally convinced her, "Hey, you should give this a try. I think you'd be great at it." And I have been able to train her from ground zero, really, and work with her. She's doing amazing, and I'm so proud of her. It's really changed her life in a lot of ways. But we are focused exclusively on local marketing mastery, which is selling my 12-month mentorship to local business owners and agencies and marketers who service local business owners. And I help them with all their marketing and sales and tech and getting these consistent systems for themselves. I've also shifted into new strategies as time has gone on. I started offering lower ticket items and masterclasses, and right now that's working extremely well as a front-end ad strategy. It brings in amazing buyers and people that are the perfect fit for what I have to offer. We do also do setup packages where we will actually build out the entire system for somebody. So that really is able to service those people who they really want to work with us. They really need help, but they don't have the time to actually set up these systems in the first place. So maybe they think the coaching sounds great, but they're just worried they don't have the time to actually put it into action. So I do think the setup packages are awesome, but we have a lot of people that end up transitioning into the mentorship after just for ongoing support. So those are great options for people who either have a marketing department internally, or maybe even, one person in marketing that they feel like can handle it after the build out is done, but they know they're going to need some extra support. We've even had people who work with agencies, but their marketing director who oversees everything, they really want to make sure they understand exactly what their setup is, make sure that they control their internal sales and marketing assets, and that they would be able to identify, what is not working versus what is working when an agency is managing that. So over the course of the last 4 years, you can see that things have changed quite a bit. I've gone through my own challenges of just being an entrepreneur. I have definitely leaned in heavily in the mastermind group that I am a part of. And ultimately, Ollie has become my one-on-one coach. So I pay him quite a bit of money every month to just work with me personally, as well as the mastermind. And I just can't tell you what a valuable investment that has been. I have been able to build a business that produces more than 7 figures a year just selling my information. And I never really knew that that was possible before, but I can tell you that it's 100% possible. And if you've just listened to this story, you'll see exactly how I did it. Now, what I want to do is help other people do the exact same thing. So that is why I decided to launch my new mastermind. I wasn't necessarily planning on starting it right now, but I had a mentorship student who was dying for me to get this started. He wanted more advanced, higher level support for his consulting business, as well as for what he was working on for his clients. He just wanted to move faster, and he wanted a bigger and better way to work with me. And so we went ahead and started the program. And that is exactly what this mastermind is going to focus on. So it's not going to be for the local marketing side necessarily. However, the campaigns that you're running for your clients, if you are in the marketing or consulting space, definitely something that will be a part of what we go through. But this is going to be something really specific to helping you create your own 7-figure information business. That could be coaching, consulting, even selling SaaS. And this is an amazing way to really take all the systems and the processes that I've built through this journey and implement them for yourself in the easiest possible way. You'll actually have the ability as well to sell my resources and my accounts and snapshots as your own, if that's something that you want to do or have the ability to do. And that's something I've never offered in my mentorship program before. So a lot more one-on-one time, a lot more advanced support, a focus on creating and building that 7-figure information business, and the ability to work a lot more closely with me. It's actually going to have 2 live events per year, and some of those will actually be on my farm. So a lot of you guys know I was able to purchase a 61-acre farm in cash, build my dream home here. We're really just creating this amazing farm life, and I'm loving it so much. And it would be a perfect setting to have our mastermind events. So it's going to be a mixture of in-person, it's going to be a mixture of one-on-one with me and collaboration with the group, as well as a continued very heavy focus on implementation. So I can share my entire systems with you with the click of a button, and you can take everything that I've done and that I've tested and that's working and implement it yourself. And you're also going to get the ability to leverage, I pay my coach $6,300 per month, and that's before going to mastermind events and, the other things that I invest in. But that knowledge and that information just gets passed along directly to you. So you get to really leverage my coach through this mastermind program. So if you are interested in applying to be one of the founding members, I would absolutely love to have you. I'm going to drop the information in the description so that you can check it out. There is a deadline, so we're going to stop accepting applications October 4th. And so if you are interested in getting in on this program and creating your own 7-figure information business yourself, then you need to go ahead, take that step and apply right away, because once I stop accepting applications, they're not going to open it again for quite some time, at least until mid 2023. And I want this to be a small, intimate group. So definitely only apply if you feel like you are ready to create an information business, either focused around selling to your existing industry. Maybe if you're a local business owner and you want to sell back to other people who do the same thing that you do, but you can show them how to do it better. Or maybe it's selling to your end consumer, but in a new way that really hinges on some sort of digital product or information-based product. It also could be for that agency owner who really wants to scale and get more into that done with you side of things, as opposed to being a total service provider like I was when I first started. So I really hope that this has been very enlightening, inspiring, and I would love for you to join me in the expert class if it sounds like something you would also love to do. So make sure you go ahead, submit that application. I'll reach out to you. We'll talk about it. And then the rest will hopefully be history. If you have anyone that you know who could benefit from hearing this, make sure to share this with them. But until next time, I'm Allie Bloyd, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.